Joining us now and rounding out our long Lieutenant Governor Forum. There's 9 candidates on the Republican and the Democratic side. 2 Democratic candidates vying for their party's nomination for Lieutenant Governor. We had on Monday Senator Ralph Northam. Today we have Aneesh Chopra. Aneesh, we want to thank you for joining us. Great to have you on.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
It's our pleasure by all means. Now, if we could get right to it, as you know, you've not been on our show before, but this is the Straight Talk Express, so we're going to be straight. You've got a very, very impressive technology background. It's kind of a knock your socks off technology resume. So my first question is, why don't you have a functioning campaign website up?
Oh, well, we are currently, well, the basic premise is we kept our focus in 2012 for the President and Senator Kane's election. I intended to have a more formal campaign launch earlier in the new year, and you coincide websites and communications when you have that more formal campaign launch. Right now, I'm a declared candidate, but I'm mostly building the infrastructure for the campaign in 2013.
Okay, that makes sense, which leads me to my second question. You've got pretty impressive private sector experience, no doubt, and you've been involved in politics for some time, but no other political office. So what do you think is the cornerstone, Aneesh, that qualifies you to run for lieutenant governor, having not served in any other elected capacity?
Well, John, thanks for the question. You know, I've spent about 6 years in the public sector after over a decade in the private. I was Governor Kane's Secretary of Technology and, as you mentioned, President Obama's Chief Technology Officer. My number one focus was to grow the jobs and industries of the future. And I humbly believe that over the next 5 to 10 years, the Commonwealth of Virginia has to make a strong move towards attracting and growing those jobs and industries of the future right here. And as Lieutenant Governor, I feel strongly that we have the tools we need to accomplish that very important mission for the Commonwealth.
Aneesh, why don't we get to the Second Amendment in this state? As you know, Virginia has very liberal gun control laws. And, we've had several crises in this state. New pollings come out after the massacre in Connecticut the other day that suggests now that a majority of the nation and independents are favoring a restriction on automatic weapons of some kind. One of the Republican candidates for Lieutenant Governor, Jean Marie Davis, is an advocate of increased gun control measures. Do you think that in Virginia as Lieutenant Governor that anything has to change with our existing gun control laws?
Well, certainly there's one part legislative, one part executive in your question. And let me just say on a personal note, I was in the governor's cabinet, and we had a cabinet meeting with led by our chief of staff the morning of the Virginia Tech shooting. And he was called away to hear word of this tragedy, and we immediately sprung into a thoughtful and deliberative evaluation of what went wrong. We made great progress strengthening the mental health system in the aftermath of the Virginia Tech tragedy, but we didn't finish the job in connecting the information to the broader background check system. So on the at least as I begin this conversation, obviously very, very emotional from the tragedy last week, I want to suggest that on the legislative side, a good, smart first step is just to make it as easy and cost-effective for those who are involved in the commerce of guns to be able to proceed with a background check to address these questions of information so that we use the existing laws on the books, but just expand their exposure to ensure folks don't have access who are not necessarily capable, those in the mental health system, so to speak. That's a legislative question. How do we address questions of the gun show loophole and connecting the dots on the background check system? But I also believe in the executive branch, even though we have this legislative strategy, part of what the lieutenant governor can do is to take on a convening role, facilitating public-private partnerships and voluntary collaboration. And one of the questions, I remember digging into this when I was evaluating some of these questions under Governor Kane's leadership. I started asking questions as to why and how do people in gun shows run background checks. And it turns out that the technology is clunky, it's expensive, it's cumbersome. So why can't we work together to invent better ways? You know, if you walk into a Starbucks, you can literally wave your smartphone and pay your bill without opening up your wallet. You know, why can't we have something as simple and cheap and easy so that if you're in a gun show setting, you can actually rapidly check the system and ensure a safer transaction? We can do this in a voluntary, collaborative way as an executive level, in addition to addressing some of these legal challenges that confront us. And obviously the question of assault weapons is something that we are engaging in now in a conversation that dated back to the 90s. And my inclination is to be supportive of a review of whether or not there should be limitations on those. But I believe that's a national conversation that's going to take place for certain.
So bottom line, do you favor right now a automatic weapons ban or not?
Well, I don't know enough about how we define the term of automatic weapons. I mean, there's, what's a semi-automatic, what's an automatic, and what's on the list and what's not on the list. I would say, generally speaking, I absolutely support a review of weapons that have been used in previous mass shootings and what thoughtful policy conversation can be had about restricting on those that don't really seem to meet the core premise of the Second Amendment and our principles around protecting our ability and freedom to hunt. So I'm open to the conversation on automatic. But again, you asked me the question, I told you my first priority is closing the information gap. That's the first priority. 40% of guns that are sold in America don't go through a background check system. Let's first at least tackle that issue, but to do so in a smarter way. That's what I was commenting on. The ban on assault weapons is certainly an important question, but I might think of that as a second or third order question. Let's get to first principles, and that's what I was suggesting.
Let's go to transportation. Anybody that lives in this state knows that right now we have a transportation quagmire. This has been going on especially in Southeast Virginia forever. There's no answer in sight. Roads are very expensive. Do you favor a gasoline tax, a system of tolls? What is your proposal to raise the cash to fix our state's crumbling highway infrastructure?
John, I want to answer this question similar to the previous, which is there's a part legislative and a part executive. So on the legislative side, there is no doubt we need to make up for lost investment capital that we need to build a 21st century transportation network. Whether you estimate the gap at $1 billion or $1.5 billion, this is a significant gap for the Commonwealth, and we're not going to get there by raiding the general fund and borrowing and pulling from education and public safety and health care in order to close this gap. We're going to need to expand our revenue base. I am very open to strategies that basically minimize the burden on Virginians. So, some of these strategies that Senator Watkins have proposed, for example, on the wholesale cost of gasoline, have some advantages and merits because they draw on nearly a quarter of those out-of-Virginia drivers who pay at the pump in Virginia. So there's sort of a more efficient use of resources for the taxpayers of Virginia in a tool of that sort. But I am not wedded to any particular formulation for how to expand revenues. I do believe we need more revenues, but that's the legislative side. Again, you asking me about the role of Lieutenant Governor, part of what we can do is to convene more innovative approaches to transportation. I'll give you an example. I was actually born in Trenton, New Jersey. The highway, so the highway that surrounds Trenton is Route 295. They saved over $5 million by modifying the asphalt mixture used for that particular plot of highway because they were smarter about what they put into the road. I believe smarter, more intelligent approaches to surface materials, to pavement modifications, to research and development activities that can be done across multiple states. There could be ways to stretch the existing transportation dollar that, as Lieutenant Governor, I absolutely intend to convene groups of thought leaders from the private and public sectors to move forward.
Aneesh, that's I get where you're coming from. We've had a lot of those types of answers, but I'm going to continue to challenge each lieutenant governor candidate to solve this transportation issue, because I doubt you're going to find change under the seat cushion in order to rebuild the highway system that we need to attract jobs. And
well, that's not what I said, John. That's not what I said. I didn't say find change in the seat cushion. What I was saying is be smarter. Let me give you an example. The tires on the cars you and I drive have essentially doubled their productivity over the last 30 years because the private sector invested in research and development to make the materials that go into cars and tires specifically more efficient. So you get more bang for the buck, if you will, on tire use per mile. We have not seen the same innovations in surface materials in the pavement and the asphalt arena. And so the question I was simply suggesting is not squeeze another nickel out of the printing budget for the department. That I agree with you. We've heard that story 1,000 times. What I'm saying is be smarter about the materials that go into the road themselves. Have them be longer lasting, quieter, and more effective. You know, after the BP oil spill, we thought we've done as much as we can as a country to remove oil from water. But we put out $1 million prize as a country, a $1.4 million prize through the X Prize Foundation. And in less than a year, 1 year, John, we saw entrepreneurs in America improve the performance of removing oil from the water by 40% in 1 year on a $1 million privately sponsored prize. So I appreciate this is not about change in the mattress, you know, the silly, we're going to discount the, you know, silly thing to save a nickel. I'm telling you about the core operational materials budget for how we build roads and surfaces, and I'm open to the question, why can't we invent better materials? You know, we led in the White House the President's Materials Genome Project to cut in half the time it takes to bring new materials to market. Those are some of the ideas we're going to have to put into the mix because we need expanded revenue to be sure, but we also need productivity in the amount of money we spend on the roads themselves. That is on the asphalt and the construction budget itself.
Steve Ray with John Fredericks. We are speaking to Aneesh Chopra, one of the two Democratic candidates for Lieutenant Governor here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I want to get to health care issues because of your background. You have been a part of the advisory board company as a senior advisor and managing partner. That company works very closely with healthcare providers to strengthen the hospital and physician alignment, that type of thing. So you do have a background on this, as well as your participation in a health innovation conference at the South by Southwest conference last year. Yes. I want to ask you, based on Governor McDonald's recent decision on the state not setting up an exchange, what would you do differently, and how would you set up an exchange if that were your decision?
Well, listen, let me begin by saying the governor's Secretary of Health, Bill Hazel, is an extraordinary public servant, and I have great faith that he is leading a team answering questions of this sort to move the Commonwealth forward. In fact, he set up a group called the Virginia Center for Health Innovation, which brings together the public and private sectors focusing on these very questions. And I would very much, as Lieutenant Governor, join in on that collaborative spirit to address this question. Let me make three basic principles about the conversation on health reform. The centerpiece of what we need to do, bipartisan approach on health care, is to move the health care reimbursement system to reward doctors and hospitals to focus on prevention and wellness services. When I was in Governor Kane's cabinet, we put a modest, little over $100,000 program through UVA's Center for Telemedicine by allowing a video conference between pregnant moms in the Shenandoah Valley to a high-risk OBGYN specialist at UVA. That very modest investment of communications technology reduced the number of women who delivered early by 25%. A smarter investment. If we could pay people better, that is the doctors who are caring for patients, whether they do it physically or online, we can improve our healthcare outcomes. So point number one, if we reimburse today after the grant we awarded, there's no more funding. There's no, you can't get reimbursed for that kind of video conference that we used in the Shenandoah Valley to reduce costs and improve healthcare outcomes. So point number two is the way you get there is you got to get all the health insurance players engaged on this conversation.
If the next lieutenant governor in the 2014 session in the state Senate is tied 2020, that person is going to determine who has the chairman of the committees, what the power structure is. When the Republicans tied the Senate in 2013, Lieutenant Governor Bill Bolling broke with tradition and did not power share. We had many Democrats on our show bitterly complaining about that, from Dick Saslaw to John Miller, all points in between on down. Now, we had Senator Miller on the other day. I said, if one of your candidates win, are you going to power share? He said, no. What goes around comes around, and we're kicking the chairman out and putting our own in, and have a good day. And then we had your opponent, Ralph Northam, on. We asked him the same question, and he said he's got a history of working over the aisle, so he would probably be inclined to do a power share. If you become lieutenant governor, what is going to be your position on that?
Well, my general position has been to make sure that the Commonwealth focuses on the values that have been near and dear to our hearts so that our economy can grow for everyone. Inside Richmond, the reason you care about this question of power sharing is, frankly, if we had a different lieutenant governor, we would have stopped a lot of the divisive, negative policies on women's health, on gay rights, and all of these issues. So to answer your question, I would use every tool I could possibly find to stop the legislature from moving us backwards, and I would work as aggressively and collaboratively as I could on the ideas that will move us forward, whether it be growing the economy through more new businesses or strengthening our capacity to grow skills in the economy across our workforce. And there may be different circumstances for how to approach these issues. So to stop some of the negative stuff, we might have a different model as to how to work legislation through Richmond, but to come together on areas to fix the economy and to grow opportunity for everyone, there might be a different answer. So it's not a one-size-fits-all, and it's a conversation certainly worth having. But I will, to answer your question, use every tool I can to make sure Richmond doesn't put us backwards.
Can I interpret that by saying you're going to put your own committee chairman in and not share authority? Is that the answer?
Well, it's not as easy an answer as you're describing, because the rules were set in the last when the Senate was turned in 2012. So you can't just by fiat switch it back. But I would use every tool I could to minimize the chance that we have negative, backward-looking legislation that hurts the Commonwealth as opposed to those that will move us forward.
How would you define your major policy differences with your opponent, Senator Ralph Northam?
Well, I'd love to share with you what I'm hoping to do for the Commonwealth and leave it to you to comment on the differences. My priority for the Commonwealth is threefold. We've talked about putting an end to the divisive politics on women and gay rights in the legislature. I will stop that divisive behavior. But the two proactive areas I'd like to focus on, if you look at all net new jobs in the country over the last 30 years, they've come from companies less than 5 years old. We've got to strengthen Virginia's innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem to promote, I think, 100,000 new jobs by a stronger, more vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem. And we can do that as Lieutenant Governor. And finally, we need at least 100,000 more college graduates or their equivalent over the next 5-6 years if we're to retain Virginia's leadership role as the most educated and most vibrant economy in the country, and to compare ourselves around the world. To get there, we're going to have to bring some innovation to our educational system. That's what I did for President Obama, what I did for Governor Kaine, and what I hope to do in a collaborative manner for the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Aneesh Chopra, Democratic candidate for Lieutenant Governor. Aneesh, we want to thank you for your time. And if people want to get more information about your candidacy, where do they go?
You can visit www.teamchopra.org.
Aneesh, thank you for joining us. We appreciate the time.
Have a great day. Thank you.